Tom, welcome to the Rad Futures podcast. I'm very pleased to have you as a guest on my show. This is a pretty big
Thank you.
deal. Yeah, this is a big deal for me because I did some graduate research back in the day, and my background is in international regulation and policy enforcement. And to host you here on my podcast is pretty exciting because your background is extensive and very impressive, spanning decades. For the audience who are not aware, Tom is a seasoned fraud investigator who's worked in various roles at JPMorgan on Wall Street, later as a senior federal investigator in charge for the FDIC. You were a general manager for the Bank of Guam, which was very interesting. Um, Senior investigator for the CFTC, that is the Commodities and Futures Trading Commission in the World Trade Center. That was in the
Yep, that's where I
90s.
worked.
So you were the president of the Bank of Saipan for one day, which is the
Yeah, and
largest
and
indigenous
that will
bank.
but just to let you know, well, that would take me like 10 minutes. I don't think we have 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I won't get into that, but I will get into that in another session.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was so interesting. It's the largest indigenous bank in the Northern Mariana Islands. So yeah, if you want to talk about that at some point in the future, that would be awesome.
Yeah, because that would take 10 or 15 minutes to give
Yeah,
it justice.
yeah.
But the other ones, I could uh, give you some background after 9/11, I was working in New York and for an intelligence firm, and we were approached by the victims of 9/11 for me to actually figure out the connection between Iraq, Iran, and Al Qaeda. So I spent several months on doing that and including interviewing the Iraqi National Congress in London and reaching out to all my contacts in the Mossad and in the CIA and other intelligence agencies. So after several months of investigating the financial connection between Iraq, Iran, and Al Qaeda, I could not find anything. And of course, the federal government came out with their findings, which agreed with my earlier findings that they couldn't find anything either. But my heart went out to the victims of 9/11. I used to work at the World Trade Center at the Commodities and Futures Trading Commission,
Yeah.
and it was such a horrific day when that happened. I was in New York when it happened, and my wife was in New York when it happened too, and she was almost lost her life because of that. But that's a more detailed story too. But some of the other cases I worked on one of the largest um, frauds on a billion-dollar medical company who was stealing money from its investors.
Mm.
And and what I found out was that one of the banks that who worked with this company, the two executives who were working for the bank were given a position in this company, which is
Mm.
against the law. You
Sure.
can't be a banker and take an interest in your client's uh, institution, right,
Yeah.
or company, whatever. So I remember this was a very very large multi-billion-dollar bankruptcy, and I remember going into typically when you have a big complex case like this and it involves a lot of entities, there's like 30 or 50 law firms involved. So, uh, so to make a long story short, I walked into the steering committee, the committee of about four or five of the major law firms handling the case, and I said, "Listen, I just wanted to let you know I found out who was the primary driver of this whole thing. And I said, "Is anyone from X bank here?" And they said, "No, no, no one was from the X bank." And I'm not going to give you the name right now, but I don't think I did in my book. But anyway, so I said good because two of their lending officers had silent interest in the company, and you cannot be a trustee of a bond deal and represent the bondholders
Mhm.
and have your own lending officers executives taking a position. So the bank lost about 400 million to $1 billion, to put it in today's terms, because it happened like 20 years ago.
Mhm.
And so that was a major case too. And I also worked on the Madoff scandal case. My best friend Harry Marco, one of my best friends is Harry Marco Polos, who blew the whistle on Madoff. But I handled a group of handicapped victims who lost everything. And to make a long story short, and I could do more of it in another broadcast if you like, I was able to recover most, if not all, of their money that they lost. And these were multiple handicap victims. One was a Down syndrome person. And what was interesting, we appeared on Fox News, and I remember the young man. He was only 15 years old, and the Fox News host asked him, "What do you want to say to Bernie Madoff?" And the young man said, without hesitation, uh, uh, "Mr. Madoff, give me back my money." And it really stuck with me, and I was so happy that I could play a role in getting their money back.
Yeah.
So those are only some of the cases. If we each of as session, I can tell you a different case, but I hope that gives a little bit of background. So I've worked on some of the biggest cases, if not the biggest cases in the history uh, uh, of Wall Street and international lending.
Yeah, I appreciate you contextualizing your expertise there. Thank you. And it's important for the viewer to understand that these are just your sort of some of your higher profile cases, right? This doesn't um, necessarily quantify your entire experience. You
Oh
have
no, not
so
by
much.
not by a long shot.
Yeah, there's so much
But
else going on in your career or trajectory there. Um, so thank you. I really appreciate that. And I also just wanted to say, because you sent me what you sent me and I read through that. I love that. Can I mention personal that you met
oh
your
yeah,
wife?
no, you
Okay.
can mention anything that you've read. I mean, I've given some samples of my chapters at Publicizer, and so people that interested in buying my book would be able to read some of the chapters. But I gave you some extra 35 pages about me.
Yeah, which I really appreciate. Thank you because it helps me get to know you better. I really just thought that the little inclusion that you added there about meeting your wife, when you had that very short stint as the president of the Bank of Saipan, you met your wife, who was the head of the Power 99 radio station in Saipan.
Yes,
And you've been
that's
married for 30 years, happily married,
over
I
30
think.
years now, right? And our son, our youngest, is now 29 and healthy.
I love that she was running a radio station.
And
That's
now she's the head of a real estate company. So
awesome.
she's a very talented woman.
And I also just wanted to say I appreciated also the inclusion of the information about your son. So, you mentioned that after the birth of your son had a some health issues.
Oh
Um,
yeah, and just real quick about that. So I've had many different things in my life, but my youngest, when he was born 2.5 months or so premature, and needed open heart surgery. And we were living in Saipan, and they couldn't do anything, and we had to fly a doctor, a nurse, and a respiratory therapist from Saipan to Guam, Guam to Hawaii. They couldn't do anything in Hawaii. Then we went to Loma Linda, California, and they were after 3 heart procedures. He's a big strapping 29-year-old right now, but he they saved his life, and it was we lost everything. It cost $1 million, his surgeries,
yeah,
and in one day we had $1 million worth of coverage. And here's the crazy thing. That was one of the driving forces in my background. The company we had the policy with was Zurich Financial, one of the largest institutions in the world in insurance. And on the last page of a 200-page insurance document, it says congenital heart problems, we cap at 100,000. And we spent 100,000 in one day just with the airline and so on. So we had to go into a hole for $1 million, and actually we had to lose everything in order to save his life, because there was no insurance company that would pick him up because of a pre-existing condition. This
right.
is decades before Obamacare, and
Yeah,
so we lost everything, had to go on welfare for 3 months, and thank God. That's the one great thing about going on welfare. You get the best coverage, and it's free, and that saved our son's life. But I was there, trying to figure out how to pay the bills and how to find a new job. And here's a one. I had to reinvent myself many times, and I couldn't find another banking job because no one would hire a president of a bank or a senior executive of a bank if you file bankruptcy.
I
So
know. I
so
know.
then that's when I reinvented myself and became, hey, listen, I know I can do investigations and analysis and so on. So
Mhm.
I stopped being a banker because I was told no one wanted me anymore.
Right.
So that was a very challenging time in my life, and I learned a lot. And I really respect people. Everyone has a different story,
Mhm.
and my story isn't any worse or better, or whichever way you look at it, than anyone else's stories. But I can relate to going through hard times, and so my heart goes out to all the victims of the Parent Plus loans, because I've been there, and that's why I've dedicated 8 years of my life to investigating this.
So thank you. On that note, you've just mentioned, yeah, I just wanted to say in the bit that you gave me via email about all of this that you just talked about, your personal life and the struggle and having to go on welfare, and you say this is an important piece to fit into, your story because this is really when you became well acquainted with institutional betrayal. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so, as a senior fraud investigator for the FCIC, you were tasked with interviewing whistleblowers who were involved in the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis. And your new book, which is called The Great American Betrayal: How Colleges, Wall Street, and Washington Preyed on America's Parents, is the result of 8 long years of investigative research into one of the many fraudulent aspects of the predatory student loan debt system in the United States. That is, the Parent Plus loans that you say were designed to trap people in debt for life. This is what we're here for. my channel is almost exclusively about this topic. That was not intentional. It's just kind of developed that way over time. I am very excited to talk to you about this, about your work investigating these Parent Plus loans, these predatory sorts of loans. So I guess, my first question for you is you say in your synopsis that 2 million Parent Plus loan families that are affected negatively by these loans are suffering now in their elderly years and are having their Social Security checks garnished because they took these Parent Plus loans out to pay for their child's education. So my question is, why do you say specifically this 2 million families figure? Where does that come from?
Yeah, let me walk you through it. This might take a little bit of time to me explain the math, but explaining the math is really necessary. And also, before I even get into that, adverse credit, I'll be talking about adverse credit means that you're late on bills. So just remember when I say adverse credit, it means you're late on bills.
Okay.
And the Parent Plus universe right now is approximately 4.4 million dollars borrowers. It was 3.8, but since I wrote the book, it jumped by nearly 600,000
Mm,
just in the 2024-2025 academic year.
okay.
So, and 20% of those parents that nearly 880,000 or so earn less than $30,000 a year.
Mhm.
Now you got to remember, some of these schools are Jesuit schools, and where I went to a Jesuit school, it's somewhere between 80 and 100,000. Parents can borrow unlimited amount of money, whereas students can only borrow $5,000 or $7,000 a year for the first year and so on.
Mhm.
But parents can borrow unlimited amount of money. And that's one of the problems of this whole thing. And this is documented, by the way, that 20% of the parents uh, make less than 30,000. And that was documented not by me, but the Department of Education under Title IV data.
Okay.
Every single family in that income bracket, based upon 8 years of me sitting down at the kitchen tables and walking through their bank statements line by line, and carry some form of adverse credit like rent, their late rent on 1 month in rent, or a car payment. Medical bills. Medical bills is so, I mean, I can relate to that, right? Medical bills, virtually almost every parent I've victim I interviewed had medical bills that they couldn't pay, that they were on a medical bill
Yeah.
payment program. That's adverse credit. And what's interesting about all these things, as a little footnote right here, is that all these things like car payments late on your rent, or medical bills or utility bills, those are not reported to the Experian and Equifax and TransUnion. So now keep that in the back of your head for a later interview, but which is crazy. How can you be giving a person $100,000 loan or $200,000 loan, and they have adverse credit, which is illegal to give anyone with adverse credit, 100,000 or 200 or $300,000 loan, but they do. But it doesn't stop at $30,000.
Mhm.
When you add the next group of parents, those earning between 30 and 50,000, now that even goes up further, another 20% or so. So now, once we add those in, it's bringing it up to 1.5 million or so, right? And then in my sample chapters, you saw that I gave you the Stephen Bird February 2026 independent review. And what he did was actually correlated or supported my belief. And he just says that these so many of these schools are, especially in the South, are just preying on these poor people and
Mm,
giving all the Pell Grants to rich kids, right?
mm.
Which which makes, well, it makes sense for the universities because that's how they can get their money. The
Oh,
benefit of all
right,
these universities by giving out Parent Plus loans, they get, all the money, right? Except the interest. Obviously, the U.S. government gets the interest,
right.
and the 2 million figure is not a guess. It's 8 years of sitting down with these families, going through their paperwork and so on, looking at the Department of Education, and me understanding, uh, how these numbers work.
So thank you. Thank you for answering that question. I'm curious, I mean, how do you know for certain that it's only 2 million families? Why is it not more? Why is it not less? I guess, I mean, you've already gone into it, but are there other ways, do you think
Oh,
that?
absolutely, Jessica. And I want to be honest with you, your audience. 2 million is not a certified government count. However, it is my best professional estimate.
Okay.
And this is what I do for a living since 1990. So it's not like I'm just creating these things as a guesstimate. No,
Yeah.
these are well supported, and I'll walk you through it again. So I generally say there's 5 layers. Now, the first layer is 20%, according to the Department of Ed, of the 4.4 million borrowers make an income of less than 30,000. So just with that, that means there's almost 900,000 families that should not have been put in these loans.
Okay.
Okay, that's 900,000. Now the second layer is parents with 30 to 50,000, and that's another 20% or so, and that's 6.5 or 8.5 thousand addition. So if you add up, the 8.5 thousand to eight, let's say 875 8,000 to 877,000, we're well on the way to going to 2 million, right?
Okay.
And then the hidden adverse credit, as I said before, you know, uh, all these poor people, including the 30, 50,000 also, most of their adverse credit, if not all their adverse credit, is not reported to the credit rating agencies. And this is what the US government uses to approve a Parent Plus loan.
Mm,
So if these poor people have all this adverse credit, why didn't the TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian tell the US government, hey, listen, 40% or so of all your borrowers are people making less than $50,000. Shouldn't we be using their type of adverse credit? Because we don't collect that data. So,
right.
and then the final thing in this, the third layer that I call, uh, a lot of these parents got these loans before 2015.
Mhm.
And prior to 2015, you only had to be late 500 to 780 early. It was 500 earlier on, and then after 2010, it went to $780. So $500, you know that might be a car payment, or it
Yeah.
might be half of your rent or something. So it didn't take much at all for so that's where a lot of these people who are now in their 60s and 70s who took out these loans prior to 2015, now their Social Security is being garnished, and or their taxes are, if they're getting a tax refund, the U.S. government can confiscate that. So if you're only making $1,200 a month in a Social Security, what are you going to live on if you're giving a good portion of that over to the U.S. government on your Parent Plus loans?
And they're confiscating the Social Security. So how are these people existing? How are they
Oh,
living?
well, how they're doing it is so, my heart goes out. They're not taking their medicine. They're cutting back on eating. They're getting depressed. They're dying early. So it's just so horrific, Jessica, you know, and the craziness. And I think I told you the other day, Jessica, that I wrote a letter to the Pope.
Round two. All right. So you were talking about the Pope. You wrote a letter to the Pope. And
Yes, just to appeal to his sense of helping the poor.
yeah,
I mean, as you know from the Department of Education, 20% of all borrowers and 40% of all blacks make less than $30,000, and
yeah,
they can borrow unlimited amount of money, and virtually all these people have adverse credit.
yeah.
So I I just saw the abuse there by some of our leading Catholic institutions, and I had to alert the Pope to this injustice and completely against the doctrine of the Catholic Church. Love thy neighbor as thyself. This is not loving thy neighbor as thyself when the last years of their life they're being trapped, and they have no money to even buy their, at times, their medication or proper food or whatever.
Yeah.
So I wrote it on a plane when I was traveling last week, and I gave it to the nine major Vatican media outlets, and I don't know if you'll ever get to see it, but at least I tried.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. I think that, it would be the right thing to do. It would be for the Pope to actually come out and make a public statement on student loan debt, how it
Yeah, and I gave him
negatively,
the whole manuscript too. So
yeah.
he's one of the few people in the world that have the whole manuscript.
Yeah, and he's from Chicago. He's from
Yes,
Chicago.
and it is
Um,
I guess it's his brothers that still live there, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So,
I'm optimistic that I'll hear something. I'm praying on it, and hopefully, because we need everyone's help, from the Pope to the President to Congress, the House, the Senate, and the victims themselves. We have to get the word out to the victims, because the victims are so overwhelmed with everything that they don't know that I expose this fraud, which could and should help them get rid of this albatross around their neck, killing their retirement and their dreams of having the last remaining years of their life in happiness.
I mean, yeah. So I'm curious, I guess, in your research, this isn't obviously one of the questions I sent you, so you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but the
I have no problem answering any question
okay.
for the victims.
Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the main misunderstandings about student loan debt is that it is conceptualized in the mainstream media. It is frequently conceptualized as a single young person problem, right? A young borrower, a young
Right.
student. It's frequently painted as something that is a young student problem. And when you graduate college, it's your duty and responsibility to pay that debt back. And a lot of people think in their mind, we have these information shortcuts in our brain that we all just kind of default to that assumes that student loan borrowers are just all young, right? So we rarely think of them as being of retirement age. We rarely think of them as being over the age of 40, 50, 60, 70. So in your research, the main sort of pool of victims that you specifically looked at were all over the age of 50, correct?
Yeah, there were parents, and that's when typically parents help their kids uh, uh, go to their college or university of their dreams. And with students, they can only borrow a very limited amount of money over their 4-year undergraduate degree. But you got to remember, parents can borrow 100%. So if you send I went to Jesuit University, and most Jesuit universities are somewhere between 70 and $120,000 a year.
Yeah,
and and if you pay for the room board and all the tuition and everything else, you can't afford to pay it. And as I explained to you, I think in the last segment, that you can put your loan on a deferment or forbearance for 10 to 15 years.
yeah,
But every 10 years you do not pay, the government capitalizes your interest.
yeah,
And so if you had a $200,000 Parent Plus loan for one or more of your children, that now grows to 400,000.
yeah,
So it doubles, and that's outrageous. That
yeah.
how can a parent making less than $30,000 a year ever repay a loan? And
Mhm.
they can't even discharge a loan, whereas the president of the United States could discharge his bad loans for 6 times in 6 bankruptcies.
Right. Yeah.
Why is the Constitution excluding um, parents and students,
Right.
not the ability that the founding fathers fought for the revolution against the king who said, no, you cannot go into bankruptcy. No, it's constitutionally wrong. It's ethically wrong. It's morally wrong. And I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everything, right? The US Constitution was influenced by other documents that preceded it, right? And we always think of the Magna Carta, which was, the sort of first time in history, I guess in European history, that we have this declaration of the little people saying, we have rights too, right? Like not just the king. And our country was founded on these principles that we have human rights. It's all about natural law, which is ultimately, I guess people can debate this because there is a secular kind of understanding of natural law. And then there's this idea of natural law that is tied to the divine, right? Imago Dei, we are all made in the image of God. So therefore, we all are born with these implicit, inherent human rights. And I think that this removal of constitutional protection to bankruptcy is treasonous, actually. And it's harming people. It's harming the victims that you identified and interviewed. And I just wanted to say, too, for those watching, There are also a set of student loan borrowers that are adult, independent borrowers. They're not just young, kids right out of high school. These are people in their 20s, 30s, 40s who are doing graduate school. And if they do graduate programs, those graduate plus loans are also very high. Lots of people in six-figure debt there. So,
Oh, absolutely. However, they do have 40 years to figure it out. Parents, they're in the last quarter of their lives. and why rob these parents from at least having some retirement? Not worrying should I pay my parent plus loan, or should I get my medication for my cancer, or for
mhm.
my diabetes, or for whatever illness, or should I eat? If Now, the U.S. government doesn't confiscate their whole Social Security, but even if you're only getting $1,200, and let's say they only take out, they reduce it by $200 or $300, that $200 or $300 is probably paying for their medication and their food. The other is paying for their rent or whatever, or
Yeah,
their car, or something else.
yeah,
So it's just a perfect conspiracy,
yeah.
and it just drives me to I used to work for the president and Congress, and when I worked on the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, and our role was to figure out what caused the financial crisis, the biggest financial crisis in the history of the world. It was very enlightening time I spent there. But this this time, this conspiracy, everyone's looking the other way. And the pain of these parents, and I'm so outraged with how these parents are being treated by the federal government, by Wall Street, by the consultants to the colleges and universities, by the colleges and universities themselves. Or so it just irks me that not irks me. That's a it it outrages my Irish American heritage. That why do we allow this, and why isn't everyone screaming at the top of their lungs, no, no more, let's help these poor people.
Yeah, why? I think that's a great question. Why aren't more people sort of raising their voices? Why aren't more people out in social media or in the streets even, honestly, protesting this? Because would you call this, what would you call this? You say it's a conspiracy, but do you think that, if we look at the set of victims that you focused on, and then we look at the sort of victimizers, right, who you've identified as the universities, Wall Street banks, the federal government, and their consultants, um, would you call this a crime?
Oh, I absolutely call it a crime. Now, as a um, certified fraud examiner for decades, I, it's really hard to prove intent.
Yeah.
So could I send these people to jail? Probably not. But the only difference between gross negligence and fraud is intent. So they have the same criteria, they're looking the other way or whatever. Um, so I do believe that some people should go to jail for this,
Mhm.
absolutely. But the most important thing is that all these parents that have been the victims of this conspiracy, where they were given illegal loans, those loans should be forgiven. And if the parents had paid anything into it, all that money should be refunded, and their credit restored, and their last 10 or 20 years of their life should be a blessing, uh, you know, not hell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's It's really sad. I've interviewed some people on my channel. I have interviews with veterans actually who signed up for different branches of the military, who enlisted for various reasons, but one of those being the GI Bill, right? So when they were, some of them when they were still enlisted, some of them when they were finished with their enlistment, used the GI Bill to go to college and found themselves still having to take out outrageous amounts of student loan debt because of the rise in tuition. Here we have, veteran soldiers from our US military being egregiously harmed financially by this predatory system. We have, as you say, 2 million poor
Well, it's poor or low income families.
and
Some people
black,
don't like when you use the word poor, but if you're making less than $30,000 and you have a family,
right?
I don't know. I grew up in a poor family, but we never knew we were poor. But there was nine of us. But my dad had a good job. I'm not a great job, but he had a good job. He was a detective in Jersey City, New Jersey, but it's so overwhelmingly incomprehensible of, you know, well, I'm a veteran also. And I was lucky, to be born a lot of years ago, right? And so, but when I was growing up, there was ethics, there were morals, companies cared about their employees. And I started working at JPMorgan when I was 17, and they paid 100% of my college and postgraduate work. And also I was in the military too, and they also helped me pay. And I actually made a little bit of money from going to school, but now everything is turned upside down. Virtually no companies pay, the tuition of their employees, or very little, small amount. But our whole society has turned upside down, and the lobbyist groups, like one of the biggest lobbies in the country, are the universities, and they control so much, and they even, I mean, there are lobbies that for the universities that purposely go after the um, Congress people and senators to, hey, come to our university and talk, and we'll give you a nice honorarium.
Sure, yeah. Right.
And it's so horrific that everyone is taking advantage of these people. There's a lot of other crises in our world. I focus on this one because I can't focus on them all.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it took 8 years of my life, and uncovering all the elements of this conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I encourage everyone to please go check out the book, The Great American Betrayal: How Colleges, Wall Street, and Washington Preyed on America's Parents. This is Tom's book. He worked on it for 8 years. It's full of his investigative research into all of these fraudulent aspects and everything that we're talking about today.
Publicizer is the publishing platform that I'm using for pre-orders of the book. And we also have a GoFundMe page too, if you'd like to make a donation to help us raise the money. See, part of the money, a part of the proceeds of the book is going to set up a nonprofit so that I can hire um, attorneys to represent each individual victim so that they could get these loans wiped off the face of the earth forever,
Right,
and these parents could and enjoy the remaining years of their life, and because these were illegal loans for
right.
for many of them.
Yeah.
Um, and we just had to protect uh, victims, everyone from the veterans, the homeless, and the poor and the hungry. And this is a worthwhile cause, and it's so the pain that these people are enduring. They don't have a voice. The billionaires and trillionaires in our world have a big voice. They control everything, right?
Yeah.
But the lower end uh, of the ladder of income, the least voice you have,
Yeah.
right? And these poor victims have no voice, and people cannot relate to their pain. But if this was your mother or your grandmother or your next door neighbor, and you saw that they were eating substandard food or not eating at all
Yeah.
or giving up their medication so that they could pay off their Parent Plus loan or give away their tax refund or being garnished by the U.S. government. And it's a hidden pain that most people don't openly see. You know, they think a lot of people on Social Security are doing very well, and a lot of people are. But those people that are in the lower end, where their Social Security's, modest compared to, some people make three to four, almost $400,000 in Social Security. But the poor, they might make $800 to $1,200 a month, and that's not very much to live on. And if when the U.S. government garnishes part of that, there's going to be a lot of pain for these poor people.
It's unlivable at this point in 2026. I mean, who was it? The speaker, Mike Johnson, recently came out and said, $174,000 per year isn't enough for them, which is why they have to do insider trading and stuff. If $174,000 annual salary isn't enough for someone
and,
working in
and and that
Washington.
doesn't include their perks too.
No.
They have the best medical,
Yeah.
which they don't pay for, and they have what 4 months of vacation or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They have a pretty good life. I mean, they some of them work real hard for us, but others, they just look at this as a ticket, to the easy life.
It's disgusting. We need term limits so bad. Oh my God. Can I just say there's so much I want to say. There's so much. We briefly kind of glazed over earlier. You said, why aren't more people standing up to this injustice? And it reminded me of, many times I've interviewed Alan on my channel, Alan Colinge of studentloanjustice.org, author of The Student Loan Scam, the book. Everybody can go check that out as well. I have spoken with Alan about this on numerous occasions, and we've kind of sort of settled on this idea, I guess, or this reality maybe, that because we see it every day on X, that there is just a bunch of propaganda right now, right? We see bot farms trolling the internet. Anytime you post anything that's critical of student loan debt online, you get swarmed by these paid shills and bots and accounts that aren't even real people half the time. And they have a very specific narrative that they push, and it's very clear that this is being driven and paid for. So I feel like that's part of the reason there is a little bit of, the element of propaganda and some brainwashing going on, I think, of the public. People just assume that what they see and read online is correct, and there are issues with this. And then the other thing I was going to ask you is, I guess, You see elements of criminality here, right? So we have large institutions, we have lobbying groups, we have Wall Street banks, the federal government in some instances, we have their consultants. Um, it's very difficult, and I know this because of my background doing a doctorate in criminology and kind of focusing on white collar crime. It's very difficult to prosecute white collar crime, even when you have a solid case.
Oh yes, and it's the the FBI reported to me on certain cases, and my role was to recover money for the U.S. government. Their role, and I helped them with it, was to help indict and convict people of white collar crimes and other types of crimes, and we did. But it's really tough to um, prove intent. Intent is very difficult, but as I said before, the only difference between gross negligence and fraud is intent.
Right.
They have the same elements, and we don't have to prove fraud. Uh, um, if we just show that there was gross negligence here, that's all that the attorneys will need, and to demonstrate that these people were put into these illegal loans.
Yeah.
As I explained in our last episode, you know, if you have adverse credit of at one time was only $500 to $780 for 90 days,
Yeah.
um, uh, you cannot get a Parent Plus loan. It's against the law, and it's so outrageous that even in the FAFSA system, if everyone knows, that's the electronic system that the U.S. government uses for the student and Parent Plus loans. But the crazy thing about it, if they only put at the beginning of the FAFSA system, I predict that we could have stopped 99% of all the bad loans.
Hmm.
All it had to say at the top of the FAFSA system, dear parent, if you have adverse credit, you cannot apply for a Parent Plus loan. However, the good news, just tell your university that you have adverse credit, and two things will happen. They will give your son or daughter additional student loans at a very discounted rate because, as you know, parents, you're going to be charged almost 15% interest on day one for your Parent Plus loan.
Yeah.
And so do not, and also the schools will consider scholarships for your sons when you're denied or cannot apply for a Parent Plus loan. And one sentence would stop it. If you have adverse credit, please do not apply for this Parent Plus loan.
Yeah.
But what's the crazy thing about this, Jessica, is even in the promissory note doesn't even explain what adverse credit is. And even in the promissory note, if they start at the top, do not sign this note if you have adverse credit. Why isn't anyone explaining? I mean, that's the only credit criteria we have is that no one with adverse credit, a certain amount of adverse credit, or bankruptcy or discharge, either Chapter 13 or 7, cannot get a Parent Plus loan. Why isn't anyone explaining that? And here's what I want to, since I've been a regulator,
Hmm.
and Fannie and Freddie I know very well because I investigated them during the financial crisis. And do you know, for the wealthiest people in our country, those that take out the Fannie and Freddie loans, and they have credit rating of 750, 850, whatever, and they ask the wealthiest people 85 questions about identifying their own adverse credit.
Right.
And in the FAFSA system, they do not ask these poor people one question. Why? Well, I know when I say conspiracy, everyone says, "Oh, wow, wow, wow!" Here's another conspiracy. But when I developed at JPMorgan and for the U.S. government criteria for RESPA and all the other regulations for mortgages and banking, you know, we base it upon common sense.
Yeah.
And why is not only common sense, but ethics or morals? I mean, why are they purposely not asking these poor people, do you have adverse credit? And alerting to them that if you do not do not fill out this application, and their school will give your son or daughter additional loans, federal loans, and also scholarships.
And that's
And
where
why? Because this is follow the money. The
follow the money.
colleges,
That's where it
yeah,
is. That's the
yeah, the
intentionality.
colleges get most of the money, and then they give a percentage to their consultants and um, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, who are paid by the U.S. government for hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for credit checks. But what what these Wall Street firms do not tell the government, it says, hey, listen, we understand somewhere between 20 and 40% of all your people make less than $50,000. Do you realize that our credit reporting agencies do not collect that information?
Right.
So if they have, the poor people are late on their rents, medical bills, utility bills, payday loans, and so on, and U.S. government, we don't collect that information. So I don't think you should use ours, especially for the poor people or the lower income people. But
Yeah.
no one, and it shouldn't, because these Wall Street firms, these credit rating agencies, are pretty smart. Why are they not explaining to their client, the U.S. government, wanting to protect these poor people that should not be put in these loans? And just because TransUnion or Equifax or Experian give them a free pass, that doesn't mean that they don't have adverse credit. These poor people do. Virtually all of them at 30,000, less than $30,000, are late because they're living to paycheck to paycheck. If their car goes, breaks down, and they have to, they don't have the money to pay for it. What are they going to do? They're not going to pay their rent, or they're not going to pay their medical bills, or they're not going to pay their payday loans. So it's I can go on and on and on. There's so many aspects of this whole system that if I had to write a screenplay about a true conspiracy,
This would be it.
uh, you know, it built its own. I mean, this conspiracy is so egregious and outrageous that being a former regulator and bank Wall Street banker and certified front examiner over the years and all my other qualifications, this is by far uh, one of the worst conspiracies that I've ever seen, but no one is looking at it at all.
Yeah.
Why?
I
Because they control Congress, they control the House and the Senate, they control the White House, they control the universities,
yeah.
they control Wall Street, and they control these consultants.
They sure do. Yes, they do. You are on the money. I love it. I love this. I love your work and your book, and I'm really excited to hopefully get people to buy it and read it, especially investigative journalists out there. I urge you to do that. Please start reporting on this stuff. Um,
And I'm
so
open up to any interviews, by the way, Jessica. I will speak to anyone day or night, 7 days a week, as long as I could fit them around my present job, and I will do that. And thank you so much for having me here today. And I thank your audience and please help out your neighbor. These neighbors of ours really need your help,
yeah,
and they're in so much pain, but they have no voice,
yeah,
and you have to be their voice.
Yeah.
please, just read my book, understand, you know, their crisis and why uh, this conspiracy has been going on for decades, and no one wants to stop it.
It's destroying lives. It's destroying the fabric of the country. The economy is being severely affected by this. I don't care what anybody says.
Oh,
Purchasing power
absolutely.
has plummeted because of this, I think. You mentioned this sort of intentionality in the design of the fraud, I guess. And then I started thinking about the policing and the regulating of white collar crime. It's notoriously difficult. How do you do something like that? Um, and historically, I mean, police, right, like the criminal justice system, law enforcement, they lack jurisdiction over some of these things. How do you prosecute a government agency, right? And then we have the creation in 1978 of the Inspectors General, which was established by Congress, an act of Congress, and they apparently, according to this Shane guy in 2007 who wrote a New York Times article, he mentions that the inspectors general did investigate student loan debt. They investigated the Department of Education at some point. I'm not quite clear on what that was for, but that's something that I would like to look into. Maybe you know about that. But what do you think?
Yeah, but that was years and years ago,
Yeah,
the and in this present administration, the inspector generals have lost a lot of their power. So um, uh, they have very little enforcement in many different branches of government. People leaving, working for the SEC, the FDIC, and everything else because uh, um, they can't work or they're getting fired or and so it's a different environment we are in right now. But the main thing is that what we're trying to do is, I mean, I'd love to see some of these people to serve time, but my role is just to get these victims their loans taken away and noted as illegal loans. And if they paid anything into it, get all their money back, and so that they could live the rest of their, you know, 10 or
yeah,
20 years of their life without having this albatross around their neck of having, not having to worry about paying for their medicine or their Parent Plus loan,
yeah,
or food, and uh, and for the other people, the non-victims, the people of their neighbors, their family, and friends, um, just get the book, read it, and get outraged like I did, for these poor people, the lower income people, and bring justice back, you know, give them bankruptcy protection, and give them the ability to enjoy the few remaining years of their lives. And that would really make my life worthwhile in these working on this for 8+ years now. I just want the victims to be made whole and to enjoy life. I mean, that's my prayer, and that's what drives me to talk on these radio shows, or write a book, or write an op-ed or whatever.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I also feel, I mean, this is partially tied to, well, it's tied to just me as a person, but partially also to my work and my background in criminology with white collar crime. I do feel, I agree with you that justice needs to be delivered. How do we do that? How do we do that in an environment aside from taking the route that you've just laid out with really focusing on restitution for the victims that have been harmed. How do we stop the Hydra from operating? How do we bring the predatory system down? How do we make it?
Well, it starts with Congress, both House, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and it leads to the White House and also, you know, to the Supreme Court. We have to uh, revamp the entire system. The
Yeah,
entire system is flawed from the application to the promissory note. You know, some everything from a. It's very hard for me to find anything good about it, other than the fact that these poor parents, their dream is sending their kids to college, but they're coerced into taking these loans and illegally. You cannot give a Parent Plus loan when a person has adverse credit. And I mean, there's a little bit more to the size of the adverse credit and other things, but that's basically it. And you have to um, look at why this is uh, happening right now. Well, it's because everything from the FAFSA application to the questions on the FAFSA, to the promissory notes, to the schools who look the other way, and even though that they know a person's in bankruptcy, they're still insisting that the person take out a Parent Plus loan, which is illegal. you if you're a dean or a person in a financial aid office and you know a person's in bankruptcy, it you can't tell them to take out a Parent Plus loan because that's against the law.
hmm
And so there's so many things to change, but it all boils down to money. The universities, unlike Europe, where universities it costs only $6,000 to go to school a year,
right,
or it's free
right.
in Scandinavia and other places, in France and
Germany,
so
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Uh, um, and the reason why uh, um, the schools have lobbied for decades to have unlimited uh, access to federal funds. But in Europe, the federal governments there said, listen, universities, listen, colleges, if you raise your tuition, you're not going to get any federal funds. And they stuck to it, and they still have great programs in Berlin and Paris and Scandinavia and so
Oh,
on.
they're phenomenal. I did my doctorate in Scotland, and I mean, it was a great school. It's one of the oldest universities in Europe. Yeah, excellent, excellent institutions over there. And I mean, if you're from the country, right? If you're from the United Kingdom, it's far less. I think now things are changing. They have started doing some similar things, which is kind of concerning with student loan debt over there. That according
Well,
to,
you know what, Jessica, if I can interrupt you for 1 second. Do you know at one time, I don't know if the program is still operating this year, but in prior years, Germany would advertise to for U.S. students to come to Germany, and they would only charge them $6,000, and they'll teach the courses in English, and the U.S. government would pay for that $6,000.
Mm,
So I don't know if the program is still active, but it was active in prior years. What a terrific thing. And the reason why Germany did that is because we have so many smart young people in our country. I mean,
yeah,
that's the future of our country.
yeah.
And they recognize, hey, listen, we have a limited resource. The United States has almost unlimited resources, smart young people.
Mhm.
Let's tap on all those. U.S. students that can't afford, 100,000, 50,000, or $40,000 tuition. Hey, let's offer them, having their course taught in English and come over to a great country and only
Yeah.
pay 6,000 and the US government will pay for it.
Yeah. I want to get back to something really quickly because I know we have to wrap it up today. You say that the majority of these 2 million families that you focused on for the Parent Plus loan debt issue, the majority of these 2 million families are poor, working class, and Black. What percentage of that 2 million do you think are Black? Do you know?
Well, we know from the Department of Education that of the people earning less than $30,000, 40% of the blacks make less than $30,000. And this is coming from, not from me as an estimate. This is coming from the Department of Ed.
Mhm.
And then even if you add, go to the next tier of maybe $50,000, you're still talking a lot of people. The people at that level too are not making a heck of a lot, especially if they have a whole family and they're paying, medical insurance now that's outrageously high, and gas, if we factor in gas and everything else. So, but we know that 20% of all the applicants made less than $30,000, and 40% of all blacks made less than 30,000 that were approved for the Parent Plus loans.
Mm.
And $30,000, you know, that's that's so low. All
Yeah.
these people have adverse credit. And the crazy thing about it, their type of adverse credit is not reported, as I said a few times before, to the TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian.
I just
Uh, uh, no one knows that. This is part of my findings, and here's these Wall Street credit reporting companies, saying to hey, use we'll charge you hundreds of millions of dollars to determine whether or not a person should be approved for a Parent Plus loan. But they know, unless they're incompetent, and I know these people are not incompetent, they're very smart. They know that uh, a very big percentage, if not the majority, have adverse credit.
Yes. So there's so you've identified so much sort of like you said, purposeful exclusion of disclaimers, the purposeful exclusion or withholding of credit checks, that so many of these victims do have adverse credit, even in the cases, would you agree with this, right? Even in the cases where there is no adverse credit, but there is, like, let's say, okay, we are still living in 2026. If you're a Black adult person, especially over the age of 50 in 2026, the likelihood that you're going to be able to get a job, right? There's ageism, there's racism, there's all of these things that are bearing down upon the victim, right? In this particular group that you focused on. So the likelihood of them ever being paid back, I feel like the banks know this. They should know that, right? They kind of have to, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Even
everyone
even
knows this. I mean, as
even
as a, as a regulator, why are we treating the wealthiest people and ask them 85 questions about their adverse credit, and asking the poorest of the poor no questions? And when we explain it to them in the promissory note that they have to sign every year to take out these parent, why don't we explain adverse credit? I mean, the list can go on and on and on about why I have no hesitation that says that this is a conspiracy, because it is. I mean, and why is it being allowed? And why are the universities, especially the some of these the pillars of our country, Catholic and other religious universities and universities that supposedly have high ethical and moral standards are looking the other way and exploiting these poor people.
And
Why?
even in cases where there is no adverse credit, when they take out the loan and there is no adverse credit, the burden of having to pay back these loans that are negatively amortized can cause adverse credit, right? It can cause,
No, absolutely. But the bottom line is that anyone making less than $30,000 and you give them 100,000 or 200 or $300,000, that you know you have to look at, and they don't do this. They don't look at the capacity of a person to pay back a loan.
Mhm.
And why? Because this is another aspect of the conspiracy. Why have they not um, allowed these parents to file bankruptcy? This is another aspect of the conspiracy.
Yeah.
Why is the president allowed to file bankruptcy 6 times, and a poor person making $30,000 who's 65 years old and now retiring and is only going to make 13,000 to $15,000 a year. Now, why are we garnishing their retirement money and letting the wealthiest of the wealthy get away with everything, or have the all the benefits of the Constitution, and these poor people have no protection?
It's unconstitutional, it is predatory, and it is morally wrong. It is unjust in every sense of of the word. And this is, I guess, I feel where we circle back, right? Like you said, why is it fair that the president can claim all of his debts, or any other wealthy person can claim all of their debts, right? Millions off their record, blank slate, and the little guy can't. So we circle back to, why this country was founded on the principles that are contained within the Constitution. It's based on natural law. All of us have a human right to be debt free, and it's not fair. And we need to get restitution for the victims, all student loan debt victims. There are so many millions of people being negatively affected by this predatory debt. Bankruptcy protections are absolutely necessary, and we need to restore them. I totally agree with you. Um, but I feel that we also need to have some system of accountability put in place for these organizations, for the institutions, the universities that are paying the lobbyists, right? They're paying their
Yeah. Let
lobbyists.
me give you one other quick example of the conspiracy. Why is it allowed by the universities and by the Department of Education? Why do they allow parents to go into forbearance or deferment for 10 to 15 years? And that means they're not paying the loan.
Mhm.
And that means that the U.S. government is capitalizing their interest. And as I said before, if they have a $200,000 loan after 10 years of not paying it, it's now 400,000.
Mhm.
Why is that being? Why aren't uh, the regulators saying these these loans are in default? These are bad loans. You can't, yeah, just because you label it a forbearance or deferment and it's allowed, it the US government's not getting paid, and the only person impacted, the only entity impacted are the poor parents, which makes no sense whatsoever that that they change the terms. If in banking, if a bank has a loan that has not been paying for 3 months, you gotta you gotta classify it as a bad loan.
Yeah.
And but and a person that doesn't pay their Parent Plus loan for 10 years and you're not considering it in default,
And
why is that not outrageously, corruptibly, whatever term, immorally, ethically wrong?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
100%.
here's the thing, because if if we found out that school X had 300,000 people, or let's say 20,000 people that had Parent Plus loans that they haven't paid in 10 years, should they be allowed to give other Parent Plus loans if a large portion of their parents are not paying these loans back because they were poor and had adverse credit? But the purpose, the reason why they don't classify these loans as default is another aspect of the conspiracy.
Mm.
And I don't say this lightly, because I'm giving example after example after example of why is this outside of sound banking, sound financing, and U.S. government lending, because and why are we so strict with Fannie and Freddie and the SBA loans and uh, um, the agricultural loans, and we look the other way for these parents? It's it's ethically, it's morally, and our founding fathers be would be crying about how we treat these poor people.
I agree. This looking the other way is also happening with other student loan borrowers that are deeply in debt as well. Most of the people that I've interviewed are over six figures deep in debt and have gone to graduate school, and they've been given, I mean, most graduate programs in the United States, especially, are running, like you said earlier, especially for the Jesuit universities and stuff like that. I mean, Brown University for an undergraduate degree is like $90,000 a year. That's 1 year. So, to think that the average student loan borrower, whether it's a parent or a student, is going to exit the program with just, a little amount of student loan debt is insane because of the
But
price of
you got to
tuition.
remember, Jessica, students can only borrow 5 to 7 thousand in their first year. Parents can borrow $90,000. They can borrow 100% of that loan, which is outrageous, especially when they're on lower income. And that's where and that's where it gets, and especially where so many of them have adverse credit. And
Yeah,
but I'd like to send to you the link again, and I'll send it to you in your email. If you could just post it as part of this,
sure.
and have the people, read the book. There's many different ways that, the digital copy costs a lot less, and please help us fight for these poor people who are in so much pain, and give them a voice. Let's give them. We're going to help them shout of the illegality of these things, of how these people are being treated, and ask for justice.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tom Borgers, for being on my channel. I appreciate your time, all of the thought, all of the energy, all of the 8 years of hard work that you put into your book. Let's remind our watchers what the name of your book is: The Great American Betrayal: How Colleges, Wall Street, and Washington Preyed on America's Parents. Please go to the website and the link that is listed below the video in the description, and buy Tom's book. And for the investigative journalists out there, please do your due diligence and do the right thing. And anyone else
And
who's
call me.
watching, and yeah, call him, interview Tom. we need to get you some more press here. So,
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jessica. It was
of course.
wonderful speaking with you.
It was great to talk to you too. Thanks so much for
And save a
breaking.
piece of cake for me.
I will. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.